Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for always tuning in on our page. It's been a while since I've popped into the page and actually left some content for you guys, but I've been looking through the page and I've realized that there's been quite some interactions as well. And I appreciate that over the period that I've been taking a break to actually write. So I wrote quite a bit. So yeah, I'm quite grateful that I got that opportunity to actually relax. So we have been talking about life, and we're speaking about life in perspective to say what is our perspective of life? What is it that as a generation we understand about life? Because look, you might find that people in the early 800s or in the 1500s or even in the 1200s perceived life differently from what we perceive today. And I believe that's very important to also understand, because based on what I've been talking about for the past few sessions that we've had since last year, is that it's very important for us to understand what our perspective is, so that if we look at life, we have a better understanding of what does it mean for us in this century, what does it mean for us in this period and in this time, because life is actually quite a large subject to cover. And I don't think we fully understand it. And I believe that whatever knowledge we have of it now is knowledge that we need to embellish. It's knowledge that we need to add on to what we already know and just build on that for the coming generations. Because how we develop up to a certain point in our dispensation or in our lifetime, it is such that it will benefit the generations that are coming after us, the knowledge that we are going to impart, which is one of the reasons why I have chosen to classify life in three main categories. And those three main categories, it's not the only categories that are out there, but for me, I believe those are the ones that give me a solid grasp of a better understanding for myself in terms of what I believe life is and what I believe life is meant to achieve. And I believe this is a system, as I've already mentioned even in the beginning of my shows, that life is a system, and this system of life is such that it requires individuals to understand it well enough for them to capitalize on the rules that govern the system, or the laws that govern the system of life. And this is very important, because failure to understand these will just simply be a life that is directionless, a life that is destructive, a life that does not have any form of insight in it that informs how it is structured. And it would be our failure for us not to have learned from generations that lived before us. Even if you look at religion, you look at faith, it would be a complete failure for us not to have learned from those who walked ahead of us, even in faith, even in religion and other aspects of life, even in science. You will see, I mean, there's no ways we could have reached the point where we are now developing cell phones if we didn't learn earlier technology than the technology we know now. There is absolutely no ways we could be making the inventions we are making now, or the innovations we are coming up with now, if we had failed to learn from generations that came before us. You will see even in academia, you cannot possibly be writing on topics and other things if you do not make reference to prior knowledge, to things that other people said prior to you writing what you are writing. And it becomes important because that understanding is such that it helps when you build up on that understanding. It helps you to do better as a person, because you are not saying the lives that lived prior to you were in vain. They meant something. Whether in your eyes they looked like failures or successes, it's irrelevant. The importance is, what are you learning from them? Because success from one person to another can be interpreted differently. And I've said that as well, to say you need to have your own definition of what you call success. And for every successful species, there are a series of things that you can classify and say that species is successful because it's doing 1, 2, 3. Even as a person, you can say my family is successful because as a family, this is our main primary objective and we are meeting it, and therefore we are successful as a family. But you see, when a people does not necessarily have these kind of goals, these kind of aspirations to say, as a people, we need to get to a point where there are certain things we excel in doing. We need to develop, we need to grow. We need to grow technologically, our knowledge. We need to grow academically, our knowledge. We need to grow scientifically. We need to grow medically. We need to grow in other different aspects of life. Even spiritually, we need to grow. We need to be living better spiritually from the ones that lived before us. It's one of those things that are actually very sad about life, that there are people who are iconic, that lived ahead of their time, that even today we still look up to them because we have not actually developed past what they knew. And it's a tragedy, because we actually need to be getting into a space where, yes, we've made those learnings, we have learned from those people, and we have developed, and now we are in a space where we are doing much better because their knowledge has helped us to set a base that allows us to do better. And I strongly believe that if we're living life with such a purpose, we are able to actually do so much more. We are able to do so much more. And whether you are talking scientific approach to research growth, or you are talking to spiritual principles of growth, whatever it is that you are looking at, we need to be in a space as a generation where we are doing better than the previous generations. And in other areas of life, truthfully speaking, we are actually doing better. Life has improved. I mean, from a period where there was no electricity to us having electricity now, never mind the load shedding, but that now that we have electricity, now that we have access to systems that allow us to reticulate water, to be able to allow people to have water everywhere, to allow people to have access to basic needs everywhere. Those things are some of the things that are showing you that as life moves, there are certain improvements. Technology has improved. Scientific knowledge has improved. Medical knowledge has improved. The manner in which certain things have been done in the past are now being done much more effectively, efficiently, and better. And this is what is important about life. Get into a space where we are able to do better than the previous generations, because we have learned so much from them that we are able to do better for ourselves. So the three main pillars that I've been touching on in the past sessions that we've had, I've been looking at the pillars of life, and I said the first pillar was reproduction. And in reproduction, we're looking at basically how we reproduce after ourselves as people. And it talks to what I've just said now, to say you reproduce by knowledge. You from the knowledge you've acquired, you've developed, you've grown toward, you reproduce that by imprinting or transferring that information to the younger generation, so that when they grow and they pick up new knowledge and new information, they're able to build upon what you've already transferred to them by teaching, by training. And that becomes important, because then other generations will do better because they are learning, and those learnings are not necessarily because people have always done better. There's learnings as well, even with certain failures in the past can teach us a lot about how to handle things better in the future. And those are some of the things that are very critical, to say, don't be ashamed when people see your failures. Don't be ashamed when people get exposed to your failures. Don't be ashamed. Those failures might be so important that a generation can learn from those failures. Yes, it's not nice to fail. Sometimes it can be very embarrassing. Sometimes it can be really bad. But failures are just as equally important as successes, because they give lessons that are very valuable in life. And many a times we tend to embrace success stories. We tend to embrace people who are doing well. We never actually sit with those who are not making it, to say, how did you fail? Why did it not work out? What is your understanding of why you failed, and and actually learn from. Even if you go to people and you want them to talk to you about certain principles of life, or certain things about life, or how they are doing well, you'll find that many a times you go to people that you perceive as success stories, to say, if you've done it and it happened and you were able to deliver on it, let me hear you out. But we miss the opportunity of also talking to those who did not make it. And there's a lot to learn from that, because the person who did not make it, even the one who made it, sometimes they made it because they failed a few times before they got to making it. And this is important, because it means that, if you never give up in life and you continue to do what you need to do, you will always find yourself in a space where you are doing better at some point. And this is important, and it talks to persistence, and even the knowledge that is being transferred from one generation to the other. Many a times you will see that such knowledge and information is propagated by people who are consistent and persistent in what is their craft, and they do it so well that they begin to specialize in it, and they do it so well that they begin to have levels of knowledge around that particular aspect of life so well that they're able to transfer that and be useful to other people. And that's what reproduction is all about. The next one, we're talking about adaptation, and we're specifically touching on the fact that you are in an environment that you did not build. You found it like this. You are in planet Earth. You were not part of the committee that was consulted on how Earth needs to be built and how the system of life needs, or the ecosystem for that matter, or the cosmic system for that matter, the solar system, the lunar system, all of these systems that are there, you were not consulted. You just found them there. And all you are doing is, people have been on Earth for a long time, and all we've been doing is to try to figure out, what is this environment? What does it mean? How is it useful to us? What is it that we can capitalize on? So what that means is, we've been trying to adapt the whole time. We've been trying to just find ways on how to live better and efficiently and effectively in this environment that we find ourselves in. But part of that adaptation, what is good about it, is that it creates a motivation for people to want to learn more. And you will see in this day and age that it is so disappointing that you would find that people don't even want to learn anymore. They're just not interested in learning. They just want to focus on what they want to focus on. There's no element of desire to want to grow. There's no element of desire to want to do better. If a person is excelling in doing one thing, they want to sit on that thing and ignore everything else. And it's quite sad. And that element of adaptation needs to be revived even amongst our people. Our people need to realize that you need to continuously look around your environment and look for opportunities to grow. Look for opportunities to do better. Even if something is working, it can do better. Even if something is efficient, it can be made more efficient. And you will find, look at mining for an example. People have been mining for hundreds of years, and it has been evolving from using a peg and a shovel underground, and people started using pneumatic drills to drill and so forth. And now there's electrical drills that are drilling, going into places where people can't go because you are removing people from risk and you're putting equipment out there to do the work. It's improving with time. Now, we are now in the gold mines, for example, people are trying to now start mining deeper. It will require complex technology. Yes, the mining has been going all this whole time, but now because you are entering into new environments, deeper environments, you need to adapt. Financial systems are collapsing. New things that some of them we were not expecting would affect our economies are now affecting the economies, and we are learning to try to adjust and put ourselves in a space where some of the modifying factors that the financial people would understand or the economic people would understand, some of them are being altered slowly because there's new introductions. There's other things we never thought could impact us as severe as they do. Some of them, yes, we knew them, but we thought they were not as important, and now the hierarchy has changed because some of them we have now increased their risk to say the risk is now getting higher of such a thing happening, and we are beginning to consider things. That is all part of us trying to adapt. We are adapting in different places, in the education system, in other different systems. All we are doing is to try and adapt so we can live better, efficiently, and effectively. The last pillar that I started talking before I went on the break was response to stimuli, how we respond to what life throws at us, what the environment throws at us. How we respond to that is very, very critical in us being able to live a fruitful, effective, and a fulfilling life. And I believe this is very important for us to also understand, because how you respond, it's not about the person that's making you angry that matters, it's how you respond that matters. It's not about the person that makes you happy. It's how you respond when that person tries to make you happy. It's not about what people do around you. It's about how you respond to what people do. And once we begin to develop a mentality that says it's not about what a person does, it's about how I perceive what they do and how I respond towards what they do, you will have so much power as a person, because you will begin to realize that your emotions, your wills, and your feelings are in your hands. You have the power to determine how you feel, even if a person does something that you don't like, even if life throws difficulties at you, even if you encounter challenges, even if you deal with different things in your life, you will find yourself in a space where you realize that I have the power to decide how to respond to this particular thing. And how I respond is what ultimately then affects me. How I respond is what ultimately then changes everything around me, or everything about about me as a person. And this is important. So I think it's then at this point that I believe we then need to look at some of the principles, and we need to look at some of the laws that govern how we operate in this space, how we respond to stimuli, how certain things can actually change because of how you respond. Sometimes you may respond positively towards something, and it turns out that thing was a lie. But because you responded positively, it affected you positively, but it was a lie. Now, some of it might be truth, and you respond to it negatively and it affects you negatively and it's the truth, or you respond positively and it's the truth. And so your response basically is what determines ultimately what happens as an outcome. And you know, in the medical field, there's what they call a placebo, which is basically a pill that people take. And it's basically, when it was tested, when this thinking was tested, it was tested on the basis that you are as medically fit as, or rather you are as medically recovered as how you think, or how you think what you are taking is effective in your body. If you believe in a piece of medicine that it can do what it can do in your body, when you take it, it's not just the medicine that's working in your body, but it's also your faith that helps you. Because I have so much faith in the fact that if I take Sanucon when I have sinuses, those sinuses will go. So when you take those sinuses, there are two things that are at work there. Is your faith, and it's actually the pill that's working. You will find that even if a person just wants to die, they are tired, they're saying, I want to die, and the doctors are trying to treat that person, you will realize that that person might end up going, simply because in as much as they are being treated, their will for life, their will to want to live is no longer there. So response to stimuli has everything to do with you realizing that you cannot contaminate your human energy. You've got energy as a human being, and that energy is meant to sustain you. That energy is meant to make you effective. That energy is meant to make you do better in life. But you can only do as better as you have kept that energy pure, which means you must be careful how you respond to what comes at you. Whether it comes in a form of what you see, because we absorb everything through the senses. We see, we hear, we touch, we taste, we feel by a sense of touch. So all those five senses are such that they take information and put it in our system. But how we respond to that information, for an example, you will find 10 people that grew up in the same family. 10 people are siblings. They grew up in the same family. But how they are affected by the conditions of the family is different from one child to another. Because of their perception, you will find out of that 10, 5 or 6 of them will do good, and the rest will do bad. But you're saying, but it's the same environment. How is it that you cannot possibly do well? It's how they actually have allowed that environment to affect them, and how they responded to that environment. Some people, when they go through pain motivates them to go and do better. To say, you know, I failed in a relationship, I didn't do so well, it has caused me pain, I want to do better for myself. The next time I make a decision towards a relationship, I'm actually going to be a lot more careful, and I'll take my time and I'll do this. And some people, when they go through the pain of a relationship, they'll think, this is a mess. You know, I never even wanted to get into a relationship in the first place. Relationship, you know how you see it in social media today, people say relation mojolo is a scam or whatnot, and they're saying all of those things because your perception of what you have gone through, that's why I was saying in the beginning, there is good and there is bad, and you take lessons from both. You don't only take lessons from good stuff, you take lessons from bad stuff as well. But how you then respond to everything bad that's thrown at you also determines how you will ultimately become as a person. So this becomes very important for us to understand that. So, you know, a placebo, how it's used is that you will find that they took, when they did research on it, they took, I think, 10 people, they put them in a room, and they gave, I think they had a headache or something like that, and they gave them a headache medication. 5 of them were given the actual headache medication, and the others were given the placebo, and then all of them were told that this medicine that you are taking is the best we have in the shelves. This is now the best of what has to deal with headache. And the people took the medicine. All 10 of them were fully recovered. They fully recovered. But the others did not take the actual medication. They took a placebo, which is as good as like drinking water. There's literally nothing there. Now, but they got better. The question is, how did they get better? And this is the element that I'm trying to talk about, to say there is an element that works in the human that is more powerful than the actual medicine that you take, and is your will to live, your will to do better, your will to want to see it. Now, that will is what I call the human energy. That is to sustain you. That will is to sustain you. So that even if things don't work out, when you still have will, you stand and you do it again. People who have will are strong because of the fact that and most of the time you will find that people who have will, they will always protect that energy by avoiding being in environments that will question, environments that will take from them what they have already developed. Many a times you need to be very selfish around the energy that you have so that you can make sure that it doesn't get contaminated, because as pure as it stays, it's how long it can actually sustain you as a person. So for an example, let me touch on this before I close, and I believe it's important when we talk about response to stimuli. Let's talk about confrontation versus escape, because a lot of people, we don't realize the importance of knowing when to confront and when to escape. And this becomes important. And also how to confront and how to escape, because it's very important that sometimes we realize that there are things we use to confront. Sometimes you use your feelings of anger, bitterness, and this and that to confront. Yes, confront has an element of conflict in it, but we also need to understand that there is also an element of, within the confrontation, there is also an element of dealing with stuff, sorting things out. And that element doesn't necessarily have to have negative emotion associated with it, but you are still confronting something. You are still dealing with it. You are encountering that particular thing. You are not avoiding it. You are facing it, and you know, whether it's a face off, whether it's a it's a head on, they would call it a head on collision. That's also part. Those are some of the synonyms of confrontation: head on collision, face off, and all of that. Whatever it is, ultimately what it means is that you need to then get into a space where you are able to take the time to focus on what needs to be dealt with without running away from it, but facing it and dealing with it and fixing it or sorting it out, even if it's not getting sorted out, but talking about it or confronting it to a level where you are able to sort it out. But there are times where confrontation is also not a good thing, where you just need to keep quiet and not say anything, because that environment does not allow confrontation. If you were to confront, you would spark more flame than you want to, because that environment does not allow you to actually confront. And we need to have that wisdom as people, and that's part of response to stimuli, to say, I will not waste my energy trying to resolve something that will ultimately blow up in my face, and I will be the problem in the end. And you'll find sometimes that people who try to solve problems, they end up being the problem, because they confronted something that should have not been confronted. They confronted something that should have been looked upon and left. Because you know, there are people out there in the world that are just out there to cause trouble, and they are expecting, they are waiting for confrontation, and they call it poking, to say, I want to poke, I want to aggravate, I want to incite, I want to offend someone. I want to do something so I can see a response. There are people who are like that, and they find pleasure in doing that. Now, you as a person, you need to learn the art of knowing when is it appropriate for you to respond, to confront, to say something, and when is it time for you to just keep quiet, or sometimes even escape. You will find you might be a strong person, you are able to fight, you are able to do this, you are able to do that, and a person confronts you and they want to be violent towards you, and you choose to actually not engage in that battle. In that particular instant, you might even choose an escape, and you will look like a coward running away from a guy everyone looks at and thinks, but you can beat this person, why are you running away from that person? But ultimately you are running away because you feel this is not a battle that's worth my energy, because you've evaluated and you have realized that it is pointless for you to try and fight in this particular case, because this situation only requires you to just walk away and actually not fight. Response to stimuli. You need to learn to choose your battles wisely. But what is most important, you need to learn how to respond to everything that is thrown at you. And this becomes very important, because sometimes we engage where we shouldn't engage. Sometimes we avoid where we shouldn't avoid. But the wisdom to balance the two. And there's no hard and fast rule around it where I can say to you, when it's like this, confront. When it's like that, most of the time it's discretion. It has everything to do with how you understand your environment, the people you are dealing with, and how you can actually sort those issues out. But this is very, very critical. But what is also important that I want to touch on is how how you actually do it. And sometimes it might require you as a person to evaluate. Now, this might be a bit hard to swallow, but many a times people, when they are emotional, they are incapable of making wise moves. They are incapable of making or saying, speaking out of wisdom, speaking out of maturity. When a person is emotional, even their levels of maturity can be questionable, because most of the time they don't even know how to have the composure to say things in a manner that they need to say them. It takes a person who's going to sit down and evaluate. Sometimes it might even mean you sitting down and planning what you are going to say, even if you are angry, planning and sticking to that script so that you are able to actually confront appropriately. But some people obviously cannot manage their emotions to that level, from one person to another, different strokes for different people. And I am saying now that you as a person, you need to get to a place where you understand yourself well enough to know when can you engage and when can you not engage, so that you know how to avoid being in spaces where you can compromise yourself by how you are reacting, ending up doing things that you shouldn't say or do because you are emotionally not okay. And the how part is very critical. Or you will find sometimes that people take an escape, but the type of medium they use to escape, the type of activity they choose to use to escape, becomes a problem in the end. For an example, you can't escape your problems with alcohol. Whether you feel that it helps you at that time when you are tipsy or when you are drunk, or even drugs when you are high, or the bottom line is that at some point you are going to normalize. And when you normalize, those problems are still waiting for you. You have not done anything meaningful. Now, let me say this and make it very clear that many a times when you choose escape, it's not a permanent solution many a times. When you choose escape many a times, is to either to go and find reason around how to deal with the matter properly, or to go to find strength because you feel weak to engage, or to go and actually recuperate because you are tired. You just can't do it anymore. So sometimes it becomes important for people to learn and use methods, different methods on how they can escape some of the things. For an example, stress is very useful to human beings, because there is something that stress does in your body that will help you as a person. For an example, what I understood was that there are several hormones that are released in your body that are triggered whenever you are angry or you are afraid. Let's use fear, when you are afraid. And for an example, if you get cut in your body and you are running away from a lion, what that will do is your blood will thicken because you are afraid. Even if you have a wound, the blood will thicken and you are not going to bleed as much as you would have bled if you were in a normal space. Or you will find a situation where, for an example, you are angry and or afraid, and that anger releases adrenaline in your body and it helps you to escape. But the problem is that when that fear or that stress is allowed to stay too long in the system, it now becomes a problem. Because when it stays too long, now it begins to work against the body. And this is where people now start experiencing hypertension, shortness of breath, and all these other things that are not as useful. So there are certain things in your life that can be very useful, and escape is one of them. But most of the time you'll find that it is only a temporary solution. It's not something that is triggered to actually keep you going for long. Now, what am I trying to say? That it is important for us to understand that even if we do escape, the medium in which we use to escape must be something that is not damaging for us moving forward. You can't use something that is damaging for you to escape a problem. You just can't. You can't use an escape from pain. Maybe you've had a heartbreak and your escape is, let me not say too much, your escape might be, another girlfriend immediately after the heartbreak, or another boyfriend immediately after the heartbreak, or another would be, let me go shopping, or another would be, let me just get drunk, let me just do this, let me just do that. Whatever medium you choose to recover or to respond to what you are feeling, it needs to be a constructive method. It cannot be something that ultimately destroys you. It can't be something that ultimately breaks your budget. It can't be something that bankrupts you or gets you broke. It can't be something that ultimately costs you your health. It can be something that ultimately creates other problems that you might find a lot harder to deal with. So you can't be dealing with something this size through a medium or an activity or a process that will create a problem this size. That is not very smart. Now, how we respond to stimuli is very important, because what it means is that even when I'm about to respond to pain in my life, I'm going to sit and evaluate if this medium is really worth my energy or not, if this medium is really worth what I want to do or not, because ultimately I need to evaluate whether that thing will affect me. How is it going to change where I'm going? And if I cannot evaluate that prior to me doing what I need to do, then I'm going to create problems for myself, because I'm going to find myself in a situation where I'm just as shocked as everyone else about what I've just done, or I'm just as shocked as everyone else about what I've just found myself in. And because I made that decision without thinking, it then ended up affecting me. Response to stimuli. There are times in which you need to respond, confront. There are times where you need to escape. But whichever you choose, you need to apply wisdom for you to know when to escape and when to actually confront things. But be careful how you escape if you choose to escape. Be careful how you confront if you choose to confront, because you might ultimately end up as the problem yourself. Thank you so much.